think founders have this expectation that they read online, which is mostly coming from the East Coast or the West Coast, on what fundraising is and how it is. And they realize that what they're experiencing is very much a disconnect.
You think you know what you're doing until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And that happens every day.
You gotta have determination and like grit to a certain extent. I know that's very common, but I think if you just gotta boil it down to simplicity is, do you really want to do this no matter what?
All right, welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. You got Logan Jones and Evan Knowles here. Today we're sitting down with a guest we last had on back in 2020. We were talking with Raffi Kayat of Borderless. So we were recording out of the Huntsicker Venture Studio today. We're excited to get into this conversation. We had Raffi come down from Louisville, which we're very grateful for. So before we dive into this conversation, let's just get a quick word from our sponsors. Before highlighting our sponsors, we'd just like to state that the views and content shared on this platform do not necessarily reflect those of our show sponsors. Middle Tech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation exists to support and develop Kentucky's startup ecosystem, and we are proud to be supported by an organization whose mission aligns so closely with ours. If you're a founder building in Kentucky, you need to check out the resources that KY Innovation has to offer. You can find more information by clicking the link in our show notes or going to kyinnovation.com. Middle Tech is sponsored by Bolt Marketing. Take your website to the next level with a website that's built to work. At Bolt Marketing, they're revolutionizing websites for small businesses that are affordable, customizable, and hassle-free. Whether you have a construction company, a boutique clothing store, or you own a hot yoga studio, they have options for you. Click the link in our show notes to explore their marketing options that can transform your marketing and grow your business. And as a personal note, Bolt Marketing built our website, and they were awesome to work with throughout the entire process. We highly recommend working with. Middle Tech is also supported by Huntsicker, an impact venture studio based in Lexington, Kentucky. Huntsicker is creating companies out of the ordinary by founding and funding the next generation of purpose-driven startups. They partner with founders to create indispensable solutions to the world's most fundamental problems. On a quarterly basis, they host an invite-only intimate gathering called Fireside Convos, where attendees representing a wide network of stakeholders in the regional entrepreneurial ecosystem discuss timely topics, including the role of AI for startups out of Kentucky and the challenges of identifying and attracting talent. To be considered as a guest, visit huntsicker.co/fireside to apply. All right, Raffi, I was just mentioning in the intro there, last interviewed you in May of 2020. So it's almost been exactly 4 years since we had you on. It was episode 98 before we were even in the hundreds, which is crazy. And I'm sure we've both come a long way since we last had you on. So thanks for making the drive all the way down here in Louisville to do this in person. It's always great to get face to face with
Yeah, thanks for having me. No, I mean, it's been crazy 4 years for you guys, as well as Borderless. So excited to give you some updates, and congratulations for your podcast growing. I know you guys are in the over hundreds, I think, of episodes.
Yeah, so, I think this should be like 280
in 290 range.
Yeah,
oh wow,
we're getting close. Yeah. It's hard to kind of keep track which one comes out which time, but yeah, we're getting there. We're almost up to the 300s, which is just wild to think about. It's been like 6 years of doing this and just staying consistent with it. But it's been fun the whole time. We get to meet people like you, which is the best part of it. But let's start things off by just doing some recaps for people who might not have been around 4 years ago when we first talked to you. So just kind of start off by talking high level, what is Borderless?
Yeah, absolutely. So Borderless is a global payments platform making payouts really simple, scalable, and fast. We allow you to pay anyone, anywhere around the world in over 120 plus countries, 90 plus currencies. We really specialize in bank payouts, but we also have push to card now, where you can pay to any Visa or MasterCard. You can pay to any third wallets like PayPal, Venmo. So really, Borderless is a one-stop solution where you can come in for all of your payout needs. And whether you're a 10-person company or a Fortune 500, we have tools of integrations where it's low code, no code, to a fully customizable API that you can easily integrate. And we service multiple different industries. So that's the cool thing about Borderless, is that we are industry agnostic. So we have customers ranging from the gig economy space, like freelancing, travel and hospitality, food delivery, insurance payouts, for example, the legal disbursement, financial services, you name it, we've done it.
So what's the most comparable company that maybe the audience has heard of to what you all are doing? Like who are you up against maybe with your customers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Everyone is familiar with Stripe, I think, as far as the audience. Stripe is the go-to company when it comes to collecting payments on your site. And there's a product that Stripe offers, which is called Stripe Connect. It allows people to not just collect, but also pay out to all of the sellers or contractors that are associated with the business. So when it comes to payments, if I want to like split it down the middle, if there's collections and there's payouts, really Borderless focuses on the payouts piece. And we are agnostic as far as providers. So Borderless doesn't want to just hook you onto one collections platform, like for example, Stripe might. If you're on Stripe, you're just on Stripe. So with Borderless as an agnostic payout provider, you can have Stripe as a collection, you can have Aiden, you can have authorize.net, you can have checkout.com, you can have any of those and still connect to Borderless to be your payout provider.
Where did the name come from? Because I remember, if I remember correctly, it's part of like the original problem or mission you were trying to solve, right? Where does that name come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, since we last talked, I think 4 years ago on the previous episode, I would say the core of Borderless, enabling cross-border payments, enabling payments to be simpler, has stayed the same. But I think the product offering has changed quite drastically. So we were in the bank payment space on making bank payments simple from a collections aspect. And that was when I actually came on this podcast. We had just launched, and we actually, then the pandemic hit. So I think we were about 2 months after the pandemic. And literally most of our customers were focused in the travel and hospitality space. And then everything went bust. And so really it was a kind of like survive or die type moment for Borderless at that time. And we really, brought the entire team together. We then focused on a few pieces where customers kind of started to tell us, hey, we really want the other way around. We really want the payouts piece rather than just the collections aspect. And, they realized how powerful our banking payments is. So we just flipped it. And that's kind of where, we started with a few countries and then, quite drastically kind of grew from there afterwards.
Yeah. And, talk about your background prior to starting this company. So first off, was this your first company starting Borderless, or did you have a background in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, I always had side projects, is what I called them. I think they evolved into becoming small startups. But ever since, I was in college, I always had things on the side that I was working on. I had silly things like something called Zabuzz. It was essentially a way for people to post questions or things like that and have a community engage with them, whether that's relating to politics or things that are more involved around in your community. It kind of is like, I would say, a mixture of Reddit and Twitter to a certain extent. Then really my entrepreneurship journey kind of, took effect when I moved to New York City. And that's when I had MTAP. It's a music startup, essentially everyone becoming their own radio station. So Evan, you could be listening to music and I could be located in, California or, Portugal, for example. And I can be like, tap into Evan, what he's listening to right now. And so we could be jamming out together, for example. And we had a good run. I think we ended up, not working out as a startup. We had a lot of regulation issues, but it taught me a lot about regulations of space, which kind of led me to my next startup in that regulation space, but tied to payments, which is Borderless.
Yeah. And, I'm sure looking back now that you've been building this company for over 4 years, when you look back at the person you were, the entrepreneur you were when you first started out from this, I mean, what are some of the ways that you think you've changed the most in terms of, personally, but also as a professional? What have you learned from being an entrepreneur?
Wow. A lot, honestly. I think over the course of the years, I think one of the biggest thing that I've learned is you got to have determination and like grit to a certain extent. I know that's very common, but I think if you just got to boil it down to simplicity is, do you really want to do this no matter what? What's that reason why you want to do it? You're going to have most of the people, sometimes even your friends, sometimes even your family, tell you, hey, maybe it's time that you give this up, Evan. Maybe it's time that you stop this, Logan. And so you got to really dig in deep and understand your core. Why are you doing this? And I think that's very important. I think the other one is rolling with the punches. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? Mike Tyson. And that's so true when it comes to startups. You always have this optimism, this vision of you can make it work, and you're special. Because you can make it work, and you have a solution to a problem. And you're going to quickly find out that there's going to be other problems that you didn't think about, and the market or the customers might be leaning you one way or the other, right? And so, to be really set in your ground as a strong, tree, you have to have some wind. You have to follow that wind. A tree without wind is a weak tree at its foundation. So you have to roll with the punches. I think that's important. And then finally, I would say is you have to surround yourself, I think, with the right people, whether that's your friends, whether that's your co-founders, whether that's your just team that you're building. You got to have people that will have your back, that will, work, as far as determination goes through all odds, and believe in the mission and the vision that you're trying to build. It's very hard to find these people. It's extremely hard because no one has the same vision or determination that you have, in your mind. I think finding these people is very, very important.
Yeah, it's definitely a muscle that has to be built. You mentioned you had several side projects and just other ventures, and it's not something you can train for or prepare for. You just have to jump and train and just experience it, and then it's a muscle, and it just gets stronger and stronger. Every no just makes it easier to take the next no, and it's just all of that just continues to build, and it just is something that I think it's often asked, can you teach entrepreneurship, or can you go to college and get an entrepreneurial degree and then immediately start a business and know what you're doing? And the answer is just no. No, I think we would laugh and be like, oh, no chance you can really teach this stuff, because, like you said, you don't know what you're getting into until you you think you know what you're doing until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And that happens every day. Every time you get on a phone call with a customer and it's a big company and it's somebody that, says they're interested, and then you get into what they're actually needing and they're just not a fit.
Right.
And it's just okay, well, that was a 30-minute call that ruined my whole day. And it's well, you got to get off that call and get on to the next one. It's just, it's stuff that you just really don't understand until you're in the middle of it. And I like to describe it as a muscle, and you just have to say, one day I'm going to get up and go to the gym and just work out. I'm going to be sore. It's going to be painful, but after you get through that initial soreness, there it is. You're able to just weather that. And so that's how I've thought about it in my own life is, it's a muscle. I think that's a good, and the tree analogy is very similar.
Yeah.
It's well, if you're just a brittle tree, the wind will blow you right over and snap you in half. But if you can move with the wind a little bit, it's very similar to a muscle analogy. So I liked that.
I think on the going to the gym piece, you have to keep going every day, right?
Yeah.
For you to stay fit, for you to stay strong and get stronger, you have to maintain it. And I think that's very important, because that's the determination, that's the grit. That's because as soon as you stop for a while, that's it. You kind of are going backwards without you realizing it, because the market is moving, your customers are moving, so yeah, you have to stick to it.
Yeah. To that, it's like, well, if you really are gonna take that, as far as I think the conversation needs to go, which is like work-life balance,
Yeah.
so it's like, well, if you're really gonna jump in and go every day to the gym, and in the entrepreneurial world, that's like you're working and thinking about what you're building most of the day. And even when you're done working and you have dinner, and you can't just necessarily every night go watch TV, you got to go back to work. So it's like, how do you think about that? Like, what does it mean to go to the gym every day as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, that's the curse and the beauty of it, depending on how you look at it. As an entrepreneur, you love what you do, and you are essentially tied to it for the foreseeable future, in the sense that as long as you commit to it. And so if you have a 9 to 5 job, after 5, you're done. Um, close your laptop and you're kind of set, or you walk out of the office and you're good to go. As an entrepreneur, there is not that, sense of
Clear line.
right? You will go to dinner, and then at dinner, you'd be thinking about that conversation you had with the customer. You'd be thinking about that technical problem or that operational issue that you've had. And it's like, well, how can I solve this? And so your brain is constantly going. And so you have to set boundaries. You have to create a rhythm for you to say, here's what works for me. And just, there's no right formula. Every diet for a person who works out is different than another diet for another person. So you have to find what works for you.
Yeah. What about quality of life? We talked about this before you jumped on.
Yeah.
You noticed that, quality of life is something that you found is high in Kentucky, from where you came from, New York City, you were there. And we were talking about this whole conversation of, Kentucky's just this special place. And especially for, me, I lived in Los Angeles. I noticed the same thing. It's like, well, Kentucky's quality of life is way higher. It might not be as easy to start a business in Kentucky when it comes to many of the ecosystem and support around us, but quality of life is higher. And how do you think about that and balancing that with everything else?
Yeah, I think it all depends on the stage that you're at in your life. I think if you are looking for a lifestyle that's very intense, high intensity, whether that's in your personal life and your professional life, there are places for it. LA, New York City, those are places where you are going to get the grind every single day. It's go, go, go. Everything's fast, everything's quick, everything is kind of a little bit more difficult to attain. When it comes to a later stage in life, I would say probably a place like Kentucky. We were talking about that earlier. I personally like it. It's a little bit more for where I am in my life, because it allows me to focus more on my life. I gain a lot of my time back into my day, to help me focus on the things that I want to focus on. And that's very important. And, whether that's a certain type of relaxation, luxury space, cost of living, whatever that is, less stress, that's very important. So yeah.
Let's talk again about Borderless and the evolution of the company.
Yeah.
When we were talking about having you back on, you alluded to a few product updates, some partnerships that you guys have built out. So let's talk about how things have changed since we first talked about the company. I'll let you choose where you want to start in terms of which things you want to dive into first, but let's dive into what is new at Borderless.
Yeah. So we've done a lot of things. I think I'll start probably with the latest, and then we'll talk about some other stuff that we've done earlier this year and last year. So the latest for us is expanding our capabilities. So we want people to get paid the way they want to get paid. Right now, you don't think about it when you're making a payment. You walk into a store, you shop online, You can pull up a card, you can pay by PayPal, you can pay via bank. You have different options and you make that choice. And the business, to a certain extent, has to also make that choice because they need to make those available to you. But to a certain extent, now that's very widely common. Now it's a more mature space, the card space, the collection space versus the payout space. When we look at the payout space, we start to see kind of limitation as far as interlobity. So like meaning, for example, um, having someone get paid to their bank versus having someone get paid to their Venmo balance. You don't have that capability as a company under one platform. You can't cater for everyone. So you might start to lose certain sellers because you can't pay them a certain way that they want to get paid. So what we focused on Borderless is enabling companies to essentially resort to one platform where they can satisfy that need to pay out to different methods. So Borderless has global coverage when it comes to bank payouts. We have push to card. We have third-party wallets such as PayPal, Venmo. And so we want to add more capabilities and maybe down the line, even at some point in time, maybe cryptocurrency. So that's kind of the latest and greatest, I would say, as far as Borderless. One of the really cool things, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I guess, is around infrastructure as a service. So as a company, Borderless wants to enable other companies to start to have some of this payment technology so they can embed it, and specifically other payment partners, and specifically people in the collection space, because they might not have all the tools that they need in the payout space. They might not have the time or the resources to build everything from scratch. So they might need something to get them started so they can go to market quicker. They can capture the customer base they want. And that's something that Borderless is able to provide to them, all as a white label service infrastructure so that they can tap into at any time.
So just to expand on that a little bit more, is that like you're offering an API that they can integrate into their platform that essentially just allows them to white label the infrastructure that you guys are offering, or just to help me understand kind of how that actually plays out?
Yeah, so we actually have two offerings. One is we call Dashboard as a Service. So as Dashboard as a Service is a white labeling platform that it's very turnkey. Companies come to our website, they utilize our platform, but everything is done under their subdomain and under their branding. And so it's a very quick, easy way for payment partners to suddenly spin a product within, I would say, probably less than a week or so. It's very low touch key on their end. We do the setup and then users can start to utilize this product. The other one is an API as a service. And so they can integrate an API as a partner, and it allows them to integrate all of our infrastructure into theirs. So that means they build their own interface, they have their own product, and then in the background, we are executing all the payments. We're providing compliance as a service, a lot of the nitty gritty stuff that goes on in the background.
What's the hardest part of building a fintech company? Is it regulation? Is it navigating, all the other infrastructure that you're tying into? What's the hardest part?
That's a really good question. I think regulation is a big piece to starting up the company and also to maintain into what you want to do as far as innovation. So any type of innovation that you want to create, you have to make sure that it is within lines of the regulatory environment. I think as far as as a fintech company, you can't build stuff from scratch unless you've raised, $100 million or $200 million. And then you can go build your own. Sure, it may take you a few months, maybe a year or so. But a lot of fintech companies today, they utilize partners, providers. And so they have to rely on those providers. It's very critical as a fintech company to choose the right provider. It's very important as a provider to choose the right customer. I think that's something that is not enough talked about. And so is just as important to say no to the customers that the customers you say yes to. The same goes for the providers. You have to be, as a provider, selective into what customers you're going to bring on to make them successful. And I think at Borderless, we've been blessed in a way that we have selected providers that are, working for us in the sense that are looking for the best outcome or result that we have on our platform. And, one thing for founders, if they're thinking of, starting their own fintech company or actually any company that relies on a third-party provider, is have more than one provider. That's very important. You never know what your provider is going to go through. Even the biggest ones have fallen, and we've seen a lot of big name companies in the news recently filed for bankruptcy or closed down when they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars.
What was the most recent one? Synapse?
Synapse.
Yeah.
Didn't that happen to you with Simba when the Silicon Valley Bank thing happened? You lost like a tax API provider of some sort?
Yeah. And we built a lot of our product in alongside of a partner that went out of business, and they were one of the only people doing it at the time. And we scrambled for several months there to try to figure out how to solve that. And we ended up exiting before we ended up solving it. And that was a nightmare. It was terrible. So yeah, I've felt that pain. I've seen it out in the ecosystem, especially with financial technology. It's like you said, partners are so key. And one thing, I learned along that, it's not just fintech, it's any industry, is if you are using some kind of infrastructure or API that might save you time in the short run to get your product up and running, you have to figure out how to take, have those redundancies where if this goes out or they don't continue to raise money or they're just not getting enough customers or traction, it's closed down. Like, what's my backup? And that was one big learning with Simba, was we didn't have that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we've built Borderless to our customers, that we're agnostic on the collections aspect. You can have not just one, but multiple collection providers, and we encourage people to have that. Like, if you are on Stripe and tomorrow Stripe, for whatever reason, decides to, shut the light on you to say, hey, you no longer have access because we've changed our terms and conditions, or we deem your business risky, or we just can't support your use case or model anymore, or just because someone, from a technical point of view just happened, then your business is down, and it's down for a while. And so you need to have a redundancy in place, and that's why we've built that into, the Borderless product so that people can have that flexibility.
You talked about partners a little bit. Are there any that you want to highlight? How are you working with partners outside of kind of the context we were just talking about?
Yeah. So one really exciting thing is we have a few partnerships, that we are announcing and will be announcing. But I think one of the big ones is ACI Worldwide. They are a payments company in the space that's is great when it comes to the collections piece. And they can utilize Borderless's infrastructure to create a marketplace type product where they can compete, for example, to Stripe Connect as an alternative. So a lot of payments companies are starting to get into that space more and more, and Borderless is a current turnkey solution for them to enable payouts for them. Even payment companies who are looking to provide their merchants or businesses to do payouts for cross-border or even just locally, Borderless can be that partner for them.
And you've won, back on continuing with the partnership theme here, you've won several awards from partners within the fintech space. I've seen you win some. So talk about some of those wins you've had.
Yeah, we actually won an award by Visa, Visa Direct, which enabled us to do a lot of work with them on the push to card piece, and we've also won by the U.S. FinTech, community. It's U.S. FinTech Awards. Essentially, it looks at fintech across North America, and Borderless has won a couple of awards over the course of the years with them as Payments Tech of the Year, Startup of the Year. Most recently, I think we were a finalist for that. And also we've won under the marketplace community. It's called Marketplace Risk. And in that we have, top marketplaces like Uber, Airbnb, etc. And there's a lot of experts in that space, and we've won the payment service provider for that as a preferred provider. So if you're a marketplace, if you are a payment service provider, or if you're just a small business looking to do payouts, we can definitely help you out.
Cool. Let's we always like to transition and talk about Kentucky. Talk about your experience, things that we do well, things we need to improve on. What's your latest spiel on Kentucky and being here?
Yeah, I think Kentucky has had a great year this year. I think we've had an incredible Derby, 150th year. We've had the PGA Tour come here. I think between Louisville, Lexington, a couple 100,000 of visitors have came through here, and they've all had a great time. And I think that put a lot of attention for Kentucky as a state that is beyond of what it's known. I think a lot of people were a little bit surprised, like, oh, I didn't know Kentucky did this, or I didn't know Kentucky had a great tech scene. I didn't know Lexington or Louisville had that. I think it really shined the light on what they do. I think when it comes to what you could do, what Kentucky does really well is it can foster a community. It's very easy to get to know people in the community, in the tech community. If you're a startup, there are definitely associations, like, for example, Awesome Inc. in Lexington. There is Amplify Louisville. In Louisville, there's Render Capital, a few other VCs that can support tech startups, whether you're just starting up or don't have a product to just starting. I think what Kentucky can do better, I think you've personally experienced this, is on the fundraising side. I think there is a sense of just educational knowledge piece on on fundraising for investors, but also for founders. I think founders have this expectation that they read online, which is mostly coming from the East Coast or the West Coast, on what fundraising is and how it is. And they realize that what they're experiencing is very much a disconnect in the Midwest. So I think look at your source when it comes to fundraising. Look at where they've fundraised it, who they fundraise from, before you make any decisions to do that.
Yeah, you have to manage expectations, and as a first-time founder, it's hard to do that, because you look at where you're getting your content from, and it's probably from a coastal source. And then you start to talk to angels and funds around here, and you realize that they're way more conservative than the coast. And now your expectations, like you said, are completely misaligned. And so there's a game to play in Kentucky, and there's a game to play in San Francisco, and they're two different games, and you've got to figure out how to balance them. And, I think that if you want to play the coastal game, you've got to be on the coast. You got to be visiting people in person. You got to be in the middle of the energetic atmospheres in San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, and just navigate that space and just know how fast it moves and how they navigate networking and things of that nature. But here in Kentucky, it's way more long game. It's way more relational. The angels are not used to technology necessarily. They might not know a lot about technology, and they're going to judge you in different ways than on the coast. They're going to want to see revenue around here. They want to see some kind of traction in the early stages on the coast. If they like you and your product looks cool and your website looks cool and you have a good team, good. Yeah. That's an early stage investment right there.
Yeah.
But here in Kentucky, it's, a lot more criteria, a lot more contingencies, and just a lot more overall conservative mindset. And so you just have to figure out how to balance that. And it's hard. It takes you a couple times to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, no matter what advice I give or you read online or you might get, it's different. Fundraising is something that you have to do yourself to really understand. Everyone will have different experiences with fundraising. Everyone comes from different backgrounds, have different connections, and really it is a personal thing. At the end, especially as an early stage founder, that is your most valuable asset, unless you already have a product and making enough revenue that any investor would write you a check.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really a repetition game. It's a numbers game.
Yeah.
And you just got to keep pounding, asking for intros. That's my best tip, is just like, the people that are going to invest in you are going to be warm intros most of the time. It's hard to go cold to an investor and say, hey, here's what I'm doing, unless you really, like you said, you have good traction or you catch them on the right day. Somehow you might get through, but the best way is warm intros, networking in person, going to events and meeting angels and other founders who might write angel checks, and then getting introduced to their funds that raised or provided them capital. That's one thing, is go to other founders and say, hey, do you have any VCs you can intro me to? And, you got to be empathetic though, and also understand that those founders, their relationships with those investors are tight.
Right.
And so that's like a relationship that you got to figure out how to navigate. Fundraising is really just like such a people game, and just like it's a weird mix between people game and a numbers game.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. It's just, again, you can't learn this stuff unless you do it.
Yeah. And you have to, if you're just a solo founder, or if you're in a team of co-founders, you have to select the right co-founder. Not every co-founder is suited to fundraise. I think that's very important.
Well, that's one question that I'm curious is, when you say select the right co-founder to fundraise with, do you fundraise with a co-founder? Are you jumping on a call with you and your co-founder on an investor call, or do you just take it?
No, yeah. So basically select the person that wants to represent the company.
Got it.
Yeah.
And it might not be the CEO is what you're saying?
It might not be the
Okay.
CEO. It doesn't have to always be the CEO.
Yeah.
The CEO of the company could be the tech brains of the company.
Yeah.
Could be the one developing the software. And all he knows is machine learning and AI. And, you put that person and he starts to pitch, it's going to be a very technical pitch because he's getting into the weeds. You put an investor in front of him, has no idea what AI is or has a little bit of knowledge, and there's going to be a disconnect. And so you need to speak the language of the investor, and you need the person on the other side knowing what language to speak.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
Yeah. I saw a pitch not too long ago where it wasn't the CEO. It was somebody alongside of him that just, was a lot better at shooting the shit and just, pitching. He had better human skills than the founder might have, who was the CEO in that case. So that makes a ton of sense.
And I think, we talk about fundraising, but I always like to highlight this to a lot of founders out there, people thinking about starting a business. I think your number one focus, even at the early stage, is just customers. Just try to get customers and focus on customers. They are your biggest investors. Like, they are your number one investors. Borderless is profitable today because of its customers. They are our number one investors in a way, right? And so we tend to focus on them, see what they want as far as needs in the market, and they help us indirectly into identifying what are some of their needs that we can close to, and where can we innovate, where could we do better. And that is more valuable than a check that a VC is writing you.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Yeah, I think fundraising should be a byproduct of happy customers.
Yes.
Like, I've seen founders raise before they even have any customer traction or pilots or anything. And that's a scary place to be in.
Yeah.
I typically like to bootstrap for a little while, for months. And for Simba, it was for a year and a half until we had traction. And then you have to get to a point where that traction, in order to deliver on it and make them happy, you need funding.
Yes.
That's a good reason to raise. So yeah, I think that especially on the coast, where there's so much capital, you see people raise before maybe they have pilots or customers, but it's really hard, especially now. You saw that during, the ZERP era, where there was just funding everywhere and people was throwing money everywhere. And now it's really hard to raise at all if you don't have any kind of customer traction or
The
something to show for.
expectations are higher now. You know,
100%.
that's
Yeah.
the thing, is that there's so much competition in a way. There's so many founders out there, so much competition in your own space, that the expectations are higher. If you are a payments company, or you're an AI company, or you're a software, SaaS company, you're going to have a million competitors, and the investor you're pitching to is probably just got a pitch, or just got an email from a deck, or is about to get a pitch from another company in the same space doing similar things. And so you need to have, stand out. You need to have a reason why it's you. And that's just raises the bar.
It's going to come back to customers.
And customers is going to give you that edge, because at the end of the day, if you have the customers, investors will just follow through.
Right.
So let's talk about future thinking. So what's your big goal? What do you want to see happen with Borderless? Like, when you close your eyes and think about the future, what does it look like to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think Borderless as a payments company can branch into so many things when it comes to financial services. I think payments is at the core of everything we do. I say it's like drinking water for a human being. And so every business to operate is going to require payments, whether that's going to be in lending, in banking, in just payments. You name it, payments is the core of everything. So Borderless in the payments world, I like to compare music, because I was there, and payments. We started with cassettes. I was in the days of cassettes. It took a very long time until CDs came out, right? And then after CDs, we had MP3s, but very shortly after, iPods, MP3s. And then after that, very quickly, we've had, basically, you get to stream, you get to listen digitally to music. But it happened very fast. The same thing in payments. We've had wires for the longest time ever. It took a very long time to then release like ACH, which is a local, and ACH took like 5 days, then 3 days. And now we're into next day, same day ACH. Suddenly now we're into RTP. And that came very fast between when same day ACH, very shortly after we had RTP, if you compare that to when, Swift then to ACH came out. And now with RTP, we have FedNow. And so Borderless actually as a company is focusing on how can we bring speed to the payments, because that's a very core thing to Borderless. And we're always, I think we're, as far as company of our size, one of the first to actually have all these rails under one platform. And it's very important to think also when it comes to payments is around cost. If RTP is going to be 5 times more expensive than ACH, but not going to it's going to provide you speed, but maybe not much versus same day. And so I think with time, that cost will go down. With time, then RTP will start to make more and more sense, especially with scale, because you have economies of scale that's going to help you with that. And so it's always evolving. Now, as a company, our core is payments, but we see a lot of things that we can expand to, as far as lending, card issuance for business. We have a lot of like really cool stuff that I think as a company we can branch out to.
That's awesome. And we're excited to continue following along. Maybe in another 4 years, we'll get to have you back on and either celebrate a big acquisition or going public or something even more exciting. So congrats on all the growth. Thanks again for driving in from Louisville to come and talk to us. And we're glad you're here in Kentucky building your company. Before we let you go though, tell the listeners if they want to learn more about Borderless, your website, any social media handles, where they can find you, anything you're willing to share for them if they want to do their own research.
Awesome. Yes. Please check out Borderless at getborderless.com. Our social is at getborderless. We are accepting businesses from around the world. And again, whether you're a 10-person company or Fortune 500, for whatever payout needs you want, Borderless is definitely going to help you out. And even if we don't, we'll recommend you the right solutions. A lot of our customers that's not a good fit, we always provide essentially a guidance for them where to go and how they can solve specific solutions if we can't do that for them. Utilize the knowledge that our team has for your advantage. And then finally, I just want to say thank you both for having me today. It's been a pleasure seeing you guys, and then hopefully, and again in 4 years, we'll have this again.
Awesome. Well, that was great. Thanks, man.
Thank you, guys.